Well, g'day to wherever and whenever you might be watching this, because these things tend to have a life of their own these days. But by way of introduction, you're about to hear a short conversation between two of us talking about the kind of programs, and they vary, whether it's playgroup or mainly music or messy church, in which local churches engage with their local communities. And for many of us, there's been an experience of that, but then a question that runs something along the lines of, what happens next? How is it that when we engage with people from the community, we might do more than just provide a nice childcare service or, be nice to our neighbours? What might be the discipleship journey? So, by way of introduction, my name's Phil Smith. I'm a granddad, and as a dad and a granddad, we've had some pretty wonderful experiences with church playgroups and certainly with mainly music. I am also a Uniting Church pastor. I'm based in Queensland in the Mary Burnett Presbytery. And in that role, I get to talk to a few churches, and I discover they're all asking some similar questions.
Yeah.
So this morning I'm having a chat with Greg Colby, and Greg's in Lake Macquarie in New South Wales. And he is somebody who's had some really interesting experiences with this kind of work in the life of local church. Greg, tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, Phil. Firstly, I'm really glad that I can be part of this. I'm actually really excited about the potential for things like mainly music to be used as mission and ministry tools in churches. But there's a tendency, I think, for them to just be things that we do, forgetting the reason why we actually are doing them. I came into the church that I'm pastoring at the moment. I'm an Anglican minister, part of the Newcastle diocese, and the church that I am pastoring in has been running mainly music for 8 years. And, it's been doing it with some really faithful people who have put their heart and soul into it. But if you ask people if it had borne any fruit, it would depend on your definition of fruit as to what answer you got. Now, I think that it's borne a great deal of fruit because it has marked our mainly music as the place to go to, because people have built relationships over long periods of time.
Well, Greg, there's a thing there that I'd like to come back to, and you mentioned that timeline, 8 years. So I think part of this might be about relationships and how long that might take and what's involved in that. But you also spoke about, well, what does fruit look like?
Mm.
As I say, I am always hesitant to talk about in terms of success and outcomes and those kind of corporate things that we use when really we're talking about what is the life of Christ expressed in the church.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's a better way to think of it. So what fruit do you think people come looking for, and what do they find maybe that they weren't expecting in this experience of engaging people through these programs?
Yeah, I think there are two directions that people come from. There's the direction that our parents come from in coming to mainly music, and the first thing that they're looking for is, and what they think they're looking for, is just a social outlet for them and their children. But I think what they find, certainly with our program, what they're finding is a much deeper level of engagement with people than they actually expected. It's not just a social event. People are forming friendships that last beyond mainly music. They become friends and go out and do things outside of mainly music. We have parents who stay in our church building with their kids after we've had to go and do other things. They stay and they talk and they do life with one another. And it's
Okay, so just following that little rabbit warren for a moment. I read a figure the other day that said something like a quarter of the Australian population changes its address every year. You know,
Mm.
it may only be I move from this rental because I can't get the lease to the next suburb. But equally, there are any number of people who are moving, from city to city and state to state. So is there actually something in here that says, yeah, okay, I'm looking for, childcare, but I'm also looking to really settle into a new community. And so what you're offering is something quite significant in that respect.
Absolutely, yeah. We get people who on their own don't have a lot of family around them, but they come along to Mainly Music and they find, because we've got older volunteers, they find that grandparent type relationship that they've moved away from, or they just don't have. And we have people who develop such deep friendships that they end up becoming really part of another family, so to speak. Um,
Mate, I might jump off the deep end here, Greg Colby, but I will. And from an Anglican background and a Uniting Church background, I think we can go here. Um, Again, this is part of a why question. And if our volunteers who are in this ministry, this outreach ministry, have first of all a better understanding of why some of those families have come to them, and it might be a whole lot more than we couldn't afford daycare. There actually might be more why than that, but also why are you there as a volunteer?
yeah,
I'm there to make a cup of tea. No, 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 no. When we do baptism services, we actually make promises and say, we as the body of Christ will help to engage little children and raise them
that's
up
right.
in the life of the faith in the community. Maybe that's, this is a whole lot bigger. When you say you want to be involved in this ministry, yeah.
You're keeping your baptismal promises, the promises that we make as a community. Absolutely, yeah. In fact, that I hadn't even thought about that, but that is a really good way, interesting way of looking at that, and not just. I think it's an important way of looking at it, because when you look at something like, if you were to look at the 8 years that we were going for, the the most common question or the most common complaint that I had about Mainly Music was, well, we don't see anybody coming to church because of it. Yeah? And that sort of isn't the point, but at the same time, it is kind of a point. It is a point. If they're not coming to church, what is it that we're doing for people? We actually crossed that line this year so we've been doing it for 3 years. We've been going for 8 years before. So in its 10th year, during COVID, actually, when we were locked down and couldn't have church, one of our mothers started watching our church videos because I was posting them up to Facebook. And as a result of watching those videos, she came to faith and has started. I've just at Easter Sunday, I baptised her and her children.
God, it's so good.
It was beautiful. It was wonderful, wonderful. And she's impacted everyone around her. When she comes to church, she comes with a notebook and she's making notes during the sermons. People go, oh, that's a good idea. And other people are starting to do that too. Yeah.
Worry, somebody's going to cross-reference and they'll take, next thing you'll be getting a call.
You said this the other day. Yeah.
See, that to me is really exciting possibility, but it does bring us to, yeah, there is a real tension in this. Are we doing this for bums on seats?
Yep.
Hopefully tithing and offerings, and that will sustain our ministry and
Yeah.
our roof from leaking. That's a very easy path to go down. Are we doing this just because it's a nice thing to do? And it's kind of like, I don't have to actually tell people about Jesus because actions speak louder than words. And
Yeah.
I'll have a cup of tea and they'll somehow know that.
They'll know why I'm doing it. Yeah.
No. Or is it somewhere else that says there could be real impacts on people's lives being transformed? They might come to faith in Jesus and come on a discipleship journey. and we would like that to be within the life of our community. And so therefore, when I volunteer into this, I am actually conducting ministry, and I need to take that quite seriously. So there's a bunch of interesting stuff in there. And one of the things that struck me was the line you used about coming to church. Now, I've only ever touched a little bit on the messy church thing, but when I first looked into it, I went to an Anglican church just down at Strathpine, which is on the in Brisbane, and talking to the young priest there, and it was like bigger than Jason and the Argonauts. They were doing the Exodus, and there was activities going on, and I was just really super impressed. And he said to me, "Look, Phil, it's going well, and this takes 15 to 20 of our people to do this, and of those, 10 of them are just, we're right on." I said the other 5 keep coming to me and saying, "When will these people be at real church?"
Yeah.
Start coming to real church, which is in a pew on Sunday with the liturgy when you're wearing your robes between 9:30 and 10:30.
That's right. Yeah.
How do you respond to that kind of thinking, and do you experience any of that?
Absolutely, I get that. I get that all the time. I used to be involved in a messy church at one of my training places about 8 years ago, and that was a big thing. People couldn't see how what we were doing once a month was actually a proper church. Uh, once people started to see that, you have to explain to people what. Well, the first question is, well, what do you think church is? What is real church? Where do you have to have pews? Do you have to have the robes? Do you have to have all of these other stuff? What are the essential ingredients around which you can legitimately call something church? And I think you've got to go obviously back to what Jesus taught, and what the scriptures teach us about what church is meant to be all about. And the common ingredients are worship, prayer, food, and fellowship. All of those things are in messy church. All of those things are in mainly music as well, with the exception potentially of worship. Depending on how you look at it, because we sing Christian songs, and the kids are singing them, and the parents are singing them, and I can see people really enjoy those songs, and I think they're getting a lot more out of it than what they themselves actually even think they're getting.
So if we've started to consider the why, then coming to the what of it and how, your experience of equipping people to see themselves as missional, as, for want of it's a scary word, but as evangelists, as good newsers, and not just cup of tea makers. How are you, deliberately, intentionally, that's a great word, isn't it? Saying to people, here are the skills you might need as you come along on Tuesday morning or Saturday afternoon and engage in this process?
Well, it's one of the questions we've actually been asking ourselves of late. What are we going to do to equip our volunteers? Because a lot of them just come in and they do just make the morning tea. But what I do, I think that a really important part of each session is to begin with prayer. We all gather together, and I think that by praying to begin with, we do two things. We ask God to be there with us. We ask Holy Spirit to move in the parents and the children's and our hearts as well, because we're not just doing ministry to. We're doing ministry with. They're impacting our lives as much as we are theirs. It's a relationship. It's not a relationship of us pouring into empty vessels, but an exchange of of gifts. They care for us as much as we care for them, and so we also, when we begin with prayer, we then sort of tick in people's or flick that switch in people's minds. Oh, okay, this is something to do with church, with ministry, with God. It's not just we're here to look after, make sure that the kids have got some nice food. We're here to feed their spirits as well as their stomachs, and their minds, as well as their physical bodies as well. So.
How do you debrief at the end of that, and maybe even somehow flow that into your whatever pastoral care network you have, in terms of saying to your elders, could you give so and so a call? Or we heard at Mainly Music, so and so said, they're doing it a bit tough. Mum's in a nursing home, and the opportunities there to extend into that aspect of the life of your church's pastoral care.
The fact that the parents love the place so much and feel like it's they can be there for as long as they want to, we love that. So we have sort of once a quarter we have a get together of the volunteers and the coordinators, and we just debrief there. We talk about what's been happening, and we have regular conversations during the week as well, with one another about how things are going. And I also bring a report to our parish council each month about how Mainly Music is going and what's happening, and that then feeds into the life of the church. In that, well, here are some really good news stories that we wouldn't hear about otherwise, because they happen in there, and that's secret Mainly Music business and shall never be talked about outside of Mainly Music. We love to share the good news stories out with the parish so that they understand that on behalf of them, these volunteers are impacting people's lives.
Language, Greg, I think becomes very important, and it just occurred to me that instead of saying our Mainly Music volunteers, our ministry team at Mainly Music, and give people more of a sense of that's who you are, that's why we're here. That the language we put around this has a lot to do with the value that the church
absolutely
sees.
That's, again, something I hadn't considered, and I think that's actually a really good idea, and I'm going to incorporate that into our language. And I'm fairly, I make sure that our volunteers, our ministry team, I'm going to call them from now on, know that what they're doing is really important. That they're not just making cups of tea or making the morning tea, or just being there and being an extra hand in case something goes wrong. And we have, just recently, one of our older volunteers has been really unwell and hasn't been able to come along. And the kids have really missed her. They're saying, where's Sybil? Where's Sybil? Could we make her a card so she's not just she's a part of their family. She's a real part of, and she would think of herself as not doing much at all, but she has a huge impact.
There's so much in that, where you're talking about ministry with a relationship that goes both ways.
Yeah,
that is beautiful. And
they want to minister to Sybil. Yeah, they want her to know that they're thinking of her. Yeah.
And people say, we want to have a youth and children's ministry. And maybe what they're not saying, but that they have in mind, is Friday night youth group. Back when I was picking up church, where I met Kayleen and so on and so on. No, maybe that's not what youth and children's ministry looks like. Maybe this is what youth and children's ministry could look like. And the beauty of it is you don't have to be the 30-year-old hipster to do this.
That's right.
You can be civil. And that's like, that might actually be back to that why question of why some of these folks are here. Grandma lives in Perth. Other grandma has died.
Yeah,
And the civils of this world come those people,
that's right.
the older folks in the lives of these little children.
And I have often thought that rather than doing that traditional youth groupy sort of thing, that things like, especially for older congregations, as you've been saying, the messy music, mainly. Maybe it's a new hybrid. Yeah, and these are ways of introducing not just kids but whole families to what the life of faith can be about. Yeah,
and we often trot out that intergenerational worship.
Yeah,
Let's have a rethink about what worship looks like.
That's right.
And let's see some intergenerational stuff that actually doesn't start with 16-year-olds, but maybe starts with 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. And as you say, that longer term thing.
Yeah.
And I think maybe this is a good point for us to finish for today. I've been reading a book that was only published in February of this year by Martin Percy, Humble Church. And it was actually Bishop Jeremy Greaves.
Yep.
I had some coffee and he put me onto it. And in it, the central thesis of this thing is, if we say our problem is declining congregations numerically, therefore the solution is growth programs, church growth, missional outreach programs. Well, no. Our problem is, he says, that we have not understood that the main thing is for us to be faithful disciples of Jesus. The church's job is to point people to God, glorify God, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Come follow me. That's it. We do that, and then we'll just see what happens. And it's funny because he says, and it's sobering to read. And church growth might follow, and it just might not. But that's not our problem. Jesus says, I will build my church.
Absolutely.
Be faithful and obedient, one day, one step, 1 year, 8 years at a time. And in that, lives will be impacted because the Holy Spirit will be at work.
Yeah.
In that, yeah.
The key has to be, I think, that you have to be doing that with a determined approach. Discipleship has to be what you're actually doing. Most churches, my own included, have made the mistake of just thinking that turning up on Sunday is the limit and the full extent of what you do as a disciple. Yeah. And that's just not going to cut the mustard in any way, shape or form.
This is exciting and positive stuff, and I really want to thank you for making time, Greg.
I've really enjoyed this, Phil. Thanks for asking me. I appreciate it.
Well, we'll see how this all shakes out, and maybe one day we'll be on the world circuit as consultants in the matter.
I'll be excited to do that.
Thanks, Greg.
Good day. Bless you. Bye.